25th anniversary of the Super Nintendo. A lot of cool stuff to say, and I'll hopefully get enough of it before the day ends and the night ends. So the Super Nintendo, I find it very interesting. I never actually owned one. Well, I did, but it was very late, like just this year. The Super Nintendo was very interesting. I mainly played it because of emulator or by playing it as someone else's friend early on, but I eventually owned one. It's very interesting. It's weird. I really appreciate it because I only owned the Nintendo, and pretty much skipped. I had an N64, which I didn't like as much as I liked the Super Nintendo or the PlayStation. I'll get to why that's important. Like the Super Nintendo just had so many good franchises starting off in that series. It had a lot of beat 'em ups. It had an evolution of the RPGs from the NES era, really developing the stories, really developing the technology with additional memory space. And that competition with Sega. According to Wikipedia, also had to fight with the PC Engine. That was international, and then in North America, it was the TurboGrafx 16 and the Genesis. I really appreciated it from the NES because, like, let's be honest, the NES doesn't freaking work. Like, the cartridges are always very dusty, the console itself is very dusty, and then it takes forever to get the cartridges to play. It was very frustrating for me. Super Nintendo and onward, it was a lot better, and then it went away onto the CD era. It was basically the end of the cartridge era for console for a while, and we don't know what will happen with the NX, but that was a big gap for like, I don't know, there's the Super, this is Nintendo 64 too, but like the prime of when the cartridges ruled, it was basically ruled by the Super Nintendo. Everyone knows that the third party licenses were, it was more of a business decision than like technology, but like they did very well with like Square, of course, with RPGs. Trying to remember what else. Enix with Dragon Quest. It was really cool because like it inspired a lot of competition. There was the different Contras, the different Castlevanias, the different Mega Mans that are on each system. And Nintendo came up with so many new franchises like F-Zero, the Super Mario World franchise, even though it's not as acclaimed as the original Super Mario Bros. Series. Pilot Wings, Star Fox and Pilot Wings really used the Mode 7 3D rendering capability. Some of its technology was very interesting for like Final Fantasy 3. It was really cool to represent it. It was the winner of the console wars in my opinion, but it was really the fans who won that. I like the Sega Genesis, but like, oh, it's weird. I would consider Sega Genesis probably the second console of all time, but and then SNES the first. But I don't know which was the superior console. Even though the Super Nintendo came better, I didn't really research that. It's a pretty interesting fight between the two consoles. It was half of my favorite generation. Not generation. It was one. It's probably my favorite generation of consoles, and then half of my favorite 10 years of consoles, including the PlayStation era, which includes, of course, the CD, Saturn as well. And I even like the N64, even though it was not my favorite from that generation. Before the time comes out, let me see what else I can say about it before console runs out. I mean, it was really cool for platforming. Like it was also the end of 2D platforming for it, because after that I went to 3D platforming, and it came back a little bit recently with like indie titles and stuff. But like it wasn't like the most dominant thing like it wasn't then. Like afterwards, it was first-person shooters and stuff. Started with like Counter Strike and GoldenEye and a whole bunch of other franchises. It's mainly about 3D and I mean, some of that came from Doom and the SNES franchise as well. You know, which is interesting. So it just showed you how revolutionary of a console it was. And even though like the Genesis had like the photo copying capabilities of Super Nintendo, like I give credit to both for like being able to copy the photographic stuff for like Batman Forever and like Mortal Kombat. I forget that Breath of Fire was originally on SNES, and that was a big franchise for me. Highly sought out, highly expensive online. And I still have like the NES like original names for like top consoles and cartridges and stuff, like the Cybernator and at this time like movie franchises and adaptations were good, and it was good because the platformer, you had to be creative. You couldn't just make it a realistic thing. You had to be more creative in implementing. How would you implement a movie franchise into a game, or a cartoon franchise? Like the Looney Tunes franchise did well on platforming at the time. It started the Dragon Ball video game franchises. I don't think there was any Dragon Ball video games on the NES. Aside, this is completely unrelated, so looking at through the games. Evo was a pretty big game on emulator before it came out. That's pretty interesting. Sorry, that's not what I meant. Evo was a pretty good franchise for emulation as well, and that became really big for me, at least when I played it on emulator, because I never played a creative game like that where you turn a fish into basically anything it eats, and that took a lot of work and technical ability to create a game like that. Like all the different pixels and for each character design, every character design for every type of evolution you had. Like before, you would have like, I mean, afterwards in like Fantasy Star Online, you would have like the mags that like upgrade your skills and everything. But like, I found it was a lot more creative in evolution based on how much they were able to stretch like the graphical capabilities. I don't remember what kind of palettes they had for like the Final Fantasy characters, but the SNES, I do remember them being a lot more detailed for the profile photos. I'm not sure about the rest of the game. I mean, the NES era. what else more that I have to say? Let me see. I'm very surprised that there's an Earthworm Jim on SNES. Maybe I'm thinking of Toe Jam and all, but I could have swore that was a Genesis exclusive. Oh, that's the Super Nintendo also has the best version of was it WrestleMania Arcade? The game where it's like Mortal Kombat, except it's WWE. That was probably the most creative wrestling video game of all time. I'm trying to think of a number, but I can't really think of one. I mean, people praise No Mercy. They praise the WCW games on NC4. I'm trying to think of a number of wrestling game that's so creative. I mean, they could have had one of like anime characters or like a wrestling like Capcom game, which would have been interesting. But I still think that the Mortal Kombat engine wrestling game was the most creative of all time. Final Fight Guy was one of the most expensive games for the Super Nintendo. Oh, and there's also just the great amount of RPGs that are in the Super Famicom that I forgot to mention. I'm not an expert on this, unfortunately, despite it coming out 25 years ago, but there's a ton of them, and the genre just has so many entries, and you can get them all very cheap from and mod your look up online how to mod the Super Nintendo to play them, figuring out the language, and you'll have so much fun playing like all these $5 RPGs that you can get for the Super Famicom, which is modded onto your Super Nintendo. Or the comic book video games are really good. Wildcats, Batman Returns, even though I think the NES game better. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles got really big here. Many people find probably because of beat 'em ups. Comic books and beat 'em ups always in together. Maybe find Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time to be the best beat 'em up turtle game ever. Probably the turtle game ever. And the arcade version was better, but probably for on console was the best. Like if they ever get all four to work together and on like a virtual console like that with like at the top of the technology, that would probably be beating it. There hasn't been any beat 'em ups in the arcade for a while. That's been very weird. Joe and Mac was an interesting franchise. Nick Arcade being big on Nickelodeon. Disney games were big. Jungle Book, Lion King, Aladdin. List goes on. Oh, the Mickey Mania franchises. All the Mickey games were awesome. Just one with Donald Duck. I don't know if it was good. I never played it. They made a game about Three Ninjas, which is very humorous if anything else. Again, with the movie franchises stuff. Killer Instinct was big, and eventually they would be bought by Rare, which became really big for the Nintendo 64 era, and that started there. A lot of business materials going on there. Jurassic Park was big. I think it was big on the Genesis too, but that's movie franchises. One terrible game was Justice League Task Force. I never actually played it, but I just hear it's so bad. Franchise was Kirby. This probably had the best Kirby game and most innovative Kirby game ever. Kirby Superstar. So many mini games in it, but I had my favorite part of the game, which is just the ability to eat up everything and then turn into them. It's very superhero like. And I'm a big fan of superheroes and like Japanese superhero stuff too. I find that very interesting. There's a ton of games I haven't even played yet before, like Next to the Round and Demon's Gold Gate or Souls or something. It's weird. Brooklyn video games are like 2 copies of this game, and I never played it, but like it seemed very interesting. Legend of Mystical Ninja came here before I went to NC4, which I'm more familiar with on that console because it was like one of the few RPGs on the console before it got big. Oh, The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, considered one of the most best Zelda games of all time. It did a lot of stuff Ocarina of Time did before, because it was, I don't know, it was weird. Ocarina of Time was at the beginning of its generation with the 3D stuff, and some people might find that behind, but it did some interesting stuff. I just didn't like the backtracking in it. A Link to the Past was very action paced, like just because the SNES performed so well, and the speed of the game was so fast. Like it was just so action packed. You can speed run it. You can try and no fighting running it. Having the bosses like you can. It was basically sort of like a Metal Gear Solid game where you could just sneak around and hope and only fight bosses. Like you could play stealth mode in that game too. Like that was a really fun game, speed run wise, and if you're not expert at the game, you can still have fun with it. Uh, you have to memorize everything that is involved in that game, but if you own the SNES, it's probably like a piece of cake. Like I have some problems with that, like some Super Nintendo, like the Final Fantasy games. Final Fantasy Five, I can't. I don't know. Final Fantasy games are fairly linear, so you're pretty. It's pretty simple to go through blazes, unless it's like Final Fantasy Four, where you go through like that place where you level up like crazy. I forgot the name, but like a lot of interesting stuff there. Mario Paint being really big. Mario Paint, they use all that music stuff on Mario Paint. That's very interesting for if you want to get into. There's a lot of music. Like years later, Mario Paint became really big for music, and for YouTube, much more many years later, which is interesting. Oh, the Mickey games were done by Capcom, I believe, which is an interesting partnership. Really good for Disney at the time. Disney was really peaking, and the Disney Renaissance just started. Even though they probably had some good games before, like Chip and Dale and stuff, which probably ended of the '90s, but Disney Renaissance was happening. And they had this game Magic Sword by Capcom. I never played it, so I'm not too sure, but it's probably some memories you guys have with it too. Mega Man X. The Mega Man X franchise started on SNES. Some people are very loyal to this franchise. I liked it more on the PlayStation actually, but again, this is a really good. It was an evolution from first six Mega Mans on the NES. I only played the first X and a little bit. It got really hard. Like, I guess it really was an evolution. I don't know if the pacing was good speedrunning wise, but like the amount of difficulty it had was a good evolution of it. You also had Mega Man 7. It had really good graphics. I don't know. I wasn't an expert on that game. I don't know. And Clown Man. They really didn't go much farther in that SNES. I don't know why that was. It's probably because it's leaving. Like all these Mega Man games happened like 94 to 6. Mega Man Soccer. Not a lot of people own that game, but like on emulator, that was a lot of fun. It was creative. Like it was basically before like Mario did all those Mario soccer games, which I find interesting. Oh, one bad thing the SNES had, it had no VR Troopers games, it had no Beetleborgs games. It had a good version of Mighty Morphin for SNES. I didn't like the movie one because it didn't have the original characters, and it's just I sort of have I had 3 Mighty Morphin games, and that was at the peak at the time, like 93 to 95. And they actually all happened in 95, which is interesting because like it happened they have 3 seasons for one thing, so like they had time to develop a better game. And it's weird because like I probably shouldn't nerd out too much for Power Rangers here, but like if you figure with these 2 seasons, you have a really excellent Power Rangers game with 2 years to build up upon, but it didn't happen. Apparently, Natsumi and Bandai for the first game. All of them were done by Bandai. Big partnership with Bandai and Power Rangers all these years. I actually like the Genesis stuff for the Bandai Saban stuff better. But you know, it was interesting. They had the fighting game, which they had the fighting game for Mighty Morphin on the Genesis, and it was basically the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers game for the Genesis, not the movie or anything else. But I don't know. Some people really like that fighting game. I don't know. I didn't like how like certain monsters were preferred over the Power Rangers purists, but a lot of people have a lot of fun with it fighting game wise, so I respect them there. also forgot to mention the. I'm not familiar with it. I think they had like a Power Rangers Zero game, so I never played that before. That must be really hard to find. But like, it's probably not that expensive because it wasn't like Power Rangers at its peak. I don't know how good the game was. Oh, they have Monopoly on SNES too. I know they have the Genesis. I used to own that for a small amount of time before trading it in. And Ninja Gaiden Trilogy. I've never actually played that before. I wonder how different that is. Nosferatu. Oh, they had Shadowrun. That was a good, excellent game. Uh, it was a detective story, yet it was like a shooter, yet action-based game. That was really creative. Nintendo itself went really RPG with Earthbound, which I don't know. I played Pokemon Uranium recently, and please don't take this down, Nintendo, just because I talked about the game. And that was a very interesting game. I don't know why Nintendo took it down. It wasn't that good of a game, like storyline wise. A lot of the dialogue wasn't as punchy as like the translations of Pokemon was. There's a sort of formula to them, how they were Final Fantasy. Humor wise, I don't know why I said that. They missed the humor. It's very quirky how they write the dialogue. Again, Earthbound was a very good start for that. And the Americanization of the game was very interesting. Like, people don't like Americanizations of like all these Japanese things, but like some of them are really good. You know, like you Spoonie Bard in Final Fantasy IV, and all the Earthbound like American references were really good. I don't get why. Also, that was it was the only Earthbound game on the like forever in America. It's very funny. It's a really hard game too, because like if you don't have the instruction manual, you have no idea where you're going with a strategy guide, which I find interesting. The Peacekeepers, Sunset Riders, a lot of excellent games that didn't have franchises, unfortunately, despite them being excellent games. They just weren't well known, well marketed, and then they're freaking $1 million now because like nobody knew about them. Power Rangers Zeo, back to that. I think that was the only Power Rangers Zeo game ever released. Maybe they show up again Super Legends, but the official Power Rangers Zeo game, that was it. 1996. So it was probably leaving. SNES was probably leaving the market by then. I don't know if they ever had a Turbo game. I mean, the Power Rangers franchise was big, but Mighty Morphin was at the peak of the TV show and fandom, and of course, so would it be in video game wise, just that extra years, extra marketing, and collaborations with the crew. Everybody knew about it. Like, I don't know if like these random writers for video games will know anything about the other Power Rangers series. Although I might be wrong, they might. But there was a lot of concentration on the characters, so much emphasis, so much hype. That everybody concentrated, and they marketed well, and they knew what to do. Power Rangers, since the Mighty Morphin era of video games, I felt like has been pretty run of the mill. Loading games, Ren and Stimpy. Oh, RoboCop. That was an interesting franchise. Some of them were really terrible, but I don't know, some of them were fairly interesting. Also, that was like the only. It's weird, like. At the perfect time in 1993, that was the last time they had a RoboCop movie. And they had a RoboCop vs. Terminator. Good marketing decisions. I guess they had the competition, so they decided, how can we continue this franchise? How can we keep marketing the material even though the films didn't do well? And then they just came up with creative ideas to keep the games going. And you know, those kind of ideas, like, where you make such a shitty. They can make that generation of SNES and Genesis. They can make Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice, or like The Interview with like Seth Rogen and like James Franco into like the best game ever, they would try. It would be pretty damn close. Like, it's very unfortunate that movie franchises didn't get higher grades back then because they were really appreciated compared to now. Sailor Moon games were fun. Shaq Fu, very epically bad game. Secret of Mana, yeah, there was a lot of offshoots. So many different franchises for Square during that time in the PlayStation era. Not so much now, even though I don't know, it doesn't feel so much now. Maybe because you have to spend so much more money on like developers and like research, and like it just all that memory and production time, just so much can go wrong. Oh, fighting games became big. Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat. It all started Street Fighter Alpha 2. It all started with the SNES era. They had Karate Champ and Punch Out back then, but it wasn't like this. Super Dragon franchise. A lot of people like Super Double Dragon. But I prefer the NES ones actually. It's weird. Like some stuff I just like NES better. Oh, at the end, I wanted this. I'm gonna end it. The Super Star Wars franchise. Again, platforming games, but like it was really fun. And Super Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back has one of the most creative video game adaptations of a movie ending ever. Remembering like the Nintendo Power for it and getting so excited, I was like amazed by how they explained how they did that. Dallas. I didn't know they had TT the arcade game for Super Nintendo. Wonder how well that did. Well, they had the Tournament Fighters to milk off the fighting game franchise or fad of the, not fad, it's gone for a while, but like the peak of creative ideas in Super Nintendo era with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. That's pretty interesting. So yeah, Square had a lot of like creative RPGs like Terra Enigma, Ogre Battle, Tactics Ogre, Secret of Mana, Seiken Setsu. They would remarket some games so that would be completely different franchises. Sort of like how Saban did with, with Power Rangers, but like it just showed you how creative people got at the time. They would remarket like the Metal Heroes franchise and just do separate entities with We Go Real Boys and We Are Troopers, which I found interesting. Something you can know, figure out. They combine with Voltron. They combined two different anime series. Maybe by the same company, and meant to be sequels, but like they turned into like direct sequels. Toy Story had a lot of good, interesting graphics. So I'm reading the Super Nintendo Entertainment System games list, and it's not in alphabetical order, chronological order, unfortunately. So I'm just looking randomly. Which was a more efficient way of doing this. Yeah, Wing Commander. It was a very innovative game, not the best, but like this technology was there. Wild Guns, a good game. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention X-Men Mutant Apocalypse when it came to like good comic book games, good beat 'em up. Let me see if that was done by. Yeah, it was done by Capcom, so that would explain the Capcom moves. Oh, Yeast was becoming big. Apparently they were on Yeast 3 for like SNES. I mean, probably TurboGrafx 1 was pretty good seller for that, I think, but I don't know. It's weird how the Yeast franchise came from nothing to like being one of the most favorite versions of the game ever. Especially in the time where like Final Fantasy felt so bad. A lot of people in the Super Nintendo was the best Nintendo console or best console of all time, according to Wikipedia. It's just cool how they did the controller. They added more buttons compared to the simple 1-2, and it didn't feel like now where they add extra stuff and then it feels clunky. It's very simple. It wasn't even a big technology change. It was just adding more buttons. Like nowadays, it's very complicated using buttons. Like people don't know how to use them anymore, which I find interesting. So I would like to end this on the note of how one of the best games ever released was made on Super Nintendo in the end. Super Mario RPG. 1996 was a great year for Mario games. Super Mario RPG and Super Mario 64 released. Super Mario RPG is more expensive, but like, one was back to its roots of platforming, but it was like 3D platforming, so both were very different from the original. I mean, even Super Mario RPG was like a 3D game, like you can go multiple paths. That'd be interesting. A Super Mario 64 game done in Super Mario RPG like format. That'd be very interesting. Because I don't go and do that. So yeah, basically that was the end of the Super Nintendo era for Nintendo. Square Enix would be gone. They would lose a lot of the third party support due to its bad practices for the first two generations of consoles. The controller is not as marketable as like the Super Nintendo or NES controller. They lost a lot of market share. They didn't do good business. But somehow they did. The ruthlessness that resulted in a lot of the best games ever released in that history. Or is actually Nintendo's. It's weird. Like, someone said maybe the PlayStation shouldn't get credit for all the games that they had on their console because maybe it was just good business positions or just luck. But the Super Nintendo got credit for a lot of its excellent games, whereas it was more of a business stranglehold on the generation at the time they had on video game. It's sort of a monopoly, and Sega showed up and sort of made them have to fight for the competitors and stuff, and they lost a lot of market. So should the Super Nintendo be credited as one of the best consoles of all time because of all the games it had? I don't know. But I don't know. I do like the innovation. I do like the extra buttons. I do like every game that Super Nintendo had. Like the buttons felt very, very intuitive. Same with the NES. And the technology was a lot better. Like you didn't have to. It wasn't impossible to use the cartridges because like the blowing technology just ended up being a lot better. I don't know what they did with the cartridges, but they're just so much easier to use. Cartridges are more expensive than discs. Won't shatter as easily as discs. Won't scratch like discs. It's like there's a certain marketability for Nintendo there. Just nifty to have cartridges, like especially in the era we were at, like cartridges since like 1996. So it's been like 20 years of CDs, and 20 years later we appreciate the cartridge still. And the cartridge was at its peak with the SNES Genesis era compared to the N64 era. And the ability to keep certain saves on the cartridge opposed to keeping them on the memory card on the console now is interesting. Probably part of the times, but like I don't know, whatever they did on the Super Nintendo really led to a lot of creativity. Like, if not anything, creativity for like keeping those licenses on your console and being associated with them and being part of history that way. How they did that was just a great memory in video game history, and people with that on their resumes, they will have a lot of street cred because of that.